Yeah,
Yes, for your birthday.
gotcha.
Except I think like everyone knows your birthday now, but
Fair.
4-6. I did it and said that my goals is to help John his coup d'etat.
yeah, I said my
Uh,
I said my goal was to become a Hall of Famer baseball person.
I was on the phone with John while he was filling it out, and I convinced him to put for goals to overtake Laz as CEO of the company.
All right, we're ready. So
Yes, sir.
we are live.
We
Hello.
are live.
We are live.
Welcome,
Big,
everyone.
big,
As
big, big yesterday. Not big day today. Big yesterday though.
yes, big yesterday. So we have a lot to talk about.
For sure.
Yes, we do. David Dahl to Detroit, by the way.
Scott is foreshadowing a question I'm gonna ask. I was writing the question. I was like, I'm pretty much serving Scott a meatball here. Like,
There.
but yeah. So go ahead and fire up questions in the chat if you have them. We are gonna go ahead and just get started talking about the non-tender deadline we saw yesterday. So real quick, a recap of what yesterday meant, because I know personally it took me a long time to really understand this system, and a little bit of clarification on that goes a long way in understanding why teams did what they did and kind of the implications of a lot of the moves we saw yesterday. So the way that the system in baseball works, a team has control over a player for the first 6 years of his major league service time. 3 of those years are what are known as pre-arbitration. So that player, as long as his team tenders him a contract, makes the league minimum salary with his team, and is under team control. And then the 3 years after that, that player is arbitration eligible. So, his team once again has the decision to tender him or not tender him a contract, and at that point they must agree on a salary figure, or else each party, the team and the player, submit a salary figure to an arbitrator who then decides that player's salary. So yesterday was the deadline for teams to decide whether, for those players that are arbitration eligible, they wanted to tender them a contract for 2021 or not. Now, some players did also agree on contract figures. Others were just tendered a contract. So those that don't have an official contract for next season yet, but were tendered contracts, that means you know that they'll be with that team, but you don't know what their actual salary is. And then the players that were non-tendered yesterday are now unrestricted free agents. I think I pretty much covered everything, unless there's something
I think so.
missed, you
No, I
guys.
think you nailed it. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's have to it's always an interesting day every year. It's something that I think personally I think is such a fascinating day because more casual fans don't even realize that this day exists.
Yeah.
But it's actually incredibly important to a lot of teams. And I think it's a really good indicator of. I think the tender deadline is the best indicator of what direction a team wants to head more than any other day in the offseason. So I always find it an incredibly fascinating day for that reason.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very fair evaluation of it, and it's interesting too because, especially I can think of a lot of casual Cubs fans who are going to be wondering where Kyle Schwarber and where Albert Almora went next year.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's just that kind of thing. Evan wants to know which Royals jersey I'm wearing. It's a Royals Lorenzo Cain jersey. I got it for sale at Fanatics. It was a great deal.
Fanatics.
Highly recommend if you can see Lorenzo Cain.
As long as you use the code.
Best player
Use
on the
use
2014-2015
Digest
Royals.
code. Yeah, that team didn't exist. Use the Diamond Digest code though
Yes.
for your Fanatics purchases.
We will throw that banner up with that link at the end of the show. So, we will go ahead and get into our first question, which is I'm going to ask for your most surprising non-tender and your most surprising tender. So we'll start with, who is the most surprising player, in your opinion, that was tendered a contract yesterday?
Ooh. That's interesting.
Yeah, feel free to give us opinions in the chat.
Yeah. There's a lot, obviously, that are pretty interesting that I'm sure we'll talk about, but that was.
In terms of was, I mean, I wasn't surprised by it. I'm trying to think of something that was kind of a story, but Gary Sanchez was.
Yes, that was a notable
which I
one.
know there were a lot of rumors that he may have been non-tendered, which obviously would have been the biggest fall from, where he was his rookie year to be non-tendered before his free agency. But I wasn't surprised. I think that it's not like they have a great catching option besides him.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised that they tendered him a contract. He's obviously got to earn his spot next year. But yeah, I can't really think of that many crazy surprising tenders. I also am not nearly as informed of the other teams besides the Yankees in terms of on a tender date where I would know who was on the bubble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think Chris Bryant was another one whose decision was pretty important. And that one a little bit.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead, Scott.
No, I was just gonna say. I mean, that's your team, so your insight means the most here. But I was just gonna say, I think the Chris Bryant thing wasn't surprising to me. I think it was kind of talked about, like maybe they wouldn't, and it would be such an honestly an FU to him to not do it because of how they played his service time when he was a rookie. But that being said, I think it just made, aside from the fact that he's just too good of a player simply not to, like at a very simple level, if you just want to do the very basics of tendering and non-tendering, he's just too good to non-tender.
Yeah.
But on top of that, I think, kind of like I told you, like you can kind of tell the direction teams are going based on who they tender and non-tender. I think he might be an exception to the rule where he was tendered because at the trade deadline this year they're going to trade him. You know what I mean? I think that, and they, with all the front office turnover and stuff in that organization, who knows what direction they're going to end up heading, and whether they want to make one more run at it or sell. But I think that the options are much greater by tendering him, whereas if you don't tender him, you're kind of forced to rebuild, and there's really, you know what I mean? Now at least you can, you have choices.
No, absolutely.
I don't know if it was ever like I don't know if there's ever really like, no matter what direction they're going in, which I feel like Ruhde does think is going to be is going to be more of a selling squad, but no matter what direction they're going in, they tendering him. I don't know why there were so many rumors about it. Like, it just seemed like a no-brainer. I mean, he's a very, very good baseball player with a lot of trade value. I mean, if you just got rid of him for absolutely nothing, it would just be an extremely dumb decision. I wasn't that surprised when he was tendered.
Well, and really the surprise maybe was, it sounded like as of a week ago, it was the Cubs are frantically trying to move him before the non-tender deadline comes. So the surprise wasn't necessarily that he got tendered a contract, but that he was still with the team when the non-tender deadline passed.
Right.
And what it sounds like to me, based on a couple of things I saw on Twitter, obviously the best source, was that it seems like the Cubs weren't quite receiving as much interest in Bryant, trade interest, as they had hoped. And it was because teams thought that they were working so frantically to get rid of him that they just couldn't fit him into their budget at all. And so they were trying to kind of sell the Cubs short a little bit, catch them in a moment of need and try to take Bryant for less than the Cubs thought he was worth. And so this move of the Cubs tendering him a contract was kind of calling everyone else's bluff, saying, hey, we can fit him into our budget if we really want to, pony up.
Yeah, I'm not. I feel like that happens a lot, especially when you hit like a rental, because Brian's free agent after this year, right?
Correct. 1 year left on
S-
his in his
So when you hit
arbitration.
that kind of situation where it's very, and like Lindor's the same situation where it's very obvious these teams want to move these players. Like it's not as um forced as like the Manny Machado move where the Orioles were absolutely horrible and everyone knew he was leaving, so they had to get rid of him
Hmm.
because the Indians and the Cubs are two solid baseball teams still.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's still like any leverage that the Cubs have had, even before tendering him, like you said, it was absolutely none. And even after, they don't have leverage on teams. Like they're gonna just hope and pray that a bidding war ends up coming, and that there are a couple very very interested teams, because right now his value is low. But the only way to up it is if they somehow are able to get some teams into a big bidding war.
Evan
Yeah, that's why I
thinks
think the trade deadline is such a good opportunity for them, because
yeah.
that would be where the market would be way greater than it is in the middle of a pandemic offseason.
Yeah, and that would be
Yeah.
interesting too. I would say that if Bryant is still on the Cubs after the trade deadline, that's just an absolute failure. Like there's no
Yeah,
two
I
ways
would
about
agree with
it.
Oh,
that.
absolutely.
But if he is on the roster to start 2021, I I still think it's dicey, but I think it's fair to try and play to the trade deadline, hope that he plays well to open 2021 and get solid value out of him. Now, I don't know if teams will necessarily pay more for him for 2 months of him versus a whole season, unless he really, really comes out of the gate firing and showing that he can still be MVP Chris Bryant. But I don't know. I still think he should be gone by opening day 2021. I still think, the Cubs are really looking at having roster turnover. That's why we saw Schwarber non-tendered rather than trying to hold on to him and give him another chance. They're trying to come up with a way to shake up this lineup. And really, that probably should involve getting what you can for Chris Bryant, which Evan thinks that Chris Bryant can get a Paul Goldschmidt type return. That would be phenomenal in my eyes.
Yeah,
I really
I
surprised that.
disagree with
I
that,
don't think he'll
honestly.
command that much. I think Luke Weaver especially was in that Goldschmidt trade, and he's a phenomenal pitcher. If the Cubs could get anything of that sort in return for Bryant, that would be an excellent trade for the Cubs.
For sure, yeah, and like I said, I think with so much uncertainty and such little movement in the free agent market as well, like the trade market is just not very. You you can't take this trade market as face value for what will be the trade market like going forward,
Yeah.
like especially once the
Yeah.
season starts and spring training and all that. Even honestly, even from like a month from now on it, like I just
There's
think
just so much
so much,
uncertainty.
right, so much uncertainty. We don't even know when we're starting, like how many games we're going to play. Like there's just so much uncertainty. I don't see a player of that magnitude being moved right now.
That's
That's
true.
why I really think you're going to get the most bang for your buck at the trade deadline. I truly believe that. I think that's just when you'll have most buyers, and um, there won't be so much uncertainty in front offices about, hey, do we maybe need a rental on a third baseman? Like, no, by the trade deadline of next year whether you need one or not. And I think that's where you're going to get personally, that's why I think you're going to get the biggest return. And that's why I think tendering him was great,
Yeah.
because it gives you
Yeah.
the opportunity to do that. You're not just letting him walk for nothing. Now you are gonna, anything is something. It's like JD Martinez with me. You know what I mean? Like, it was a horrible return, but
Yeah.
what value would have? And I'm not. You're gonna get way more than that. I'm not saying that, but what value would it, keeping him the last half of the season have done us? You might as well take a chance on some kids.
That's true, and
Yeah, I think that you have like you go ahead,
I
Ryan.
think that's where you talking about that just makes me nervous as a Cubs fan, because I'm slightly worried
For sure.
that he will start
I can imagine.
2021 how he played in 2020. And, even if that was short season, not representative of what he's going to be moving forward, even with a start that cold, he can be the hottest hitter on the planet for a month, and teams are still going to be iffy and hesitant to try to really pony up and trade for Chris Bryant. So, I don't know. I think you make a fair point. You know, at the trade deadline, teams know what they're in for the rest of the season a lot more. And I do think that when more clarification comes on when the 2021 season might start, that'll open up the trade markets for Francisco Lindor, Chris Bryant a lot more. Those one-year guys. Yeah. No, like, honestly, all in all, it just makes me nervous to try and come up with what the Cubs should do with him right now.
No, it's scary, man. And I, as someone who has been in the situation of your entire team is veteran rentals that everyone on the planet knows are not coming back. Like, it's scary.
Yeah.
Like you know that you're not going to get what the fan you know you're not going to get the amount that the fans want in return. You know you're not going to get the amount that the front office even wants in return. But you also know that they're just going to be forced to move them.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do. It really is a scary. I mean, it is. It's a scary situation to be in, and that's, you know, obviously that was for about a 2-season stretch there. That was my entire fandom every day.
Yeah.
I was waking up and learning that someone else was moved for nothing. But it's scary, and that doesn't take away from the fact, you know, focusing on the tender thing, that doesn't take away from the fact that it was the right decision. And like I keep saying, anything is something, but it is it's definitely scary for sure.
Yeah. And like you were saying about the trade market, I think that you definitely will have this year. You're going to have like these, because of the uncertainty, the 1-year guys, at least again, until we have more certainty about the season. And even if we set a start date, like the NHL set a start date and they still don't really know if they're actually going to start then. Like, just the pandemic throws everything into question mark. So, I mean, like last year we were going week by week if we were going to even finish the season. So, like, I think that the 1-year rental guys, their value is so low, but at the same time, free agents are going to get underpaid this year, it seems. So I feel like the big moves are going to be like the only guys with real value right now to teams seem to be like the 3 years, 4 years of control guys that are rarely moved, but like Herman Marquez kind of thing where you can get a guy for a long time.
Don't mention that name with Christian in chat.
Yeah,
you're gonna make him act.
I regretted it.
Don't bring that name up. That'll be every question the rest of the hour.
So anyway, yeah, before this turns into the Chris Bryant show or the trade market show, we can come back a little bit to the non-tender deadline and ask who was the most surprising player to be non-tendered. And I feel like this is going to spark a discussion about a certain player that might carry on for most of the rest of the hour.
David Dahl.
There you go.
I want David Dahl.
I think a lot of people were shocked to see the Rockies non-tendered David Dahl, who, granted, I hadn't noticed was not a good hitter in 2020, but like many other hitters, was a good hitter and a very consistent hitter for the 3 years before that. So, you know, it's a question of how much faith do you have in what 2020 represents in terms of true talent, which the answer probably should be little. And it's certainly questionable that the Rockies were not willing to keep him on their roster, on their payroll. I don't know, and they clearly thought that there wasn't going to be much of a trade market for him, which surprises me.
Yeah, I just don't. We talk about how like the tender day kind of gives teams direction, like gives you an idea of what direction teams are going in, but I don't really know what direction the Rockies are going in with this, because it's just not.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like he's a $20 million player. Like, he's pretty cheap.
$2 million.
Yeah, he's $2 million.
Tender was $2 million.
He's cheap. He's a solid player. He's consistent. You can count on him. Like, and he's under control for, I think you said, like another 2 years after this. Like, I don't understand how there was no trade market for him. I don't even believe
Well, and
that.
so here's the deal. This was actually his first year being arbitration eligible. So in 3 years before 2020, 2016, 2018, 2019, Dahl had played a total of 240 games in 3 years, which is not a ton. I mean, that's averaging about half the season. But he was super consistent as a hitter. I mean, like Evan kind of jokingly mentions here, there were definitely injury concerns there, which were cited a little bit in why he was non-tendered. But for $2 million, it's kind of unthinkable.
It's ridiculous. I mean, truly, it's ridiculous. There is no justification to not pick up. If you wanted to trade him, then you pick up the tender and you trade him. If there's no trade market, it's $2 million.
Yeah.
And you have 3 years of control left. It makes zero sense. And I mean, I could go on and on, but there's no logic to it. There truly is. I have yet to see one legitimate reason why this even makes remote sense. And some other lucky team out there is gonna reap the benefits of the Rockies' horrible front office decision.
Yeah. So this kind of connects quite a bit with another question I was going to ask, which we can go ahead and kind of continue this discussion in this other question, which is which non-tender was the most disappointing? So we've touched on Dahl. I think both the teams I'm fans of maybe are definitely threw a hat in the ring in terms of disappointing non-tenders. And those being Kyle Schwarber and Maikel Franco for the Royals. And I do want to talk a little bit more about Franco being non-tendered, because unless the Royals turn around and do something with that money and actively show that they believe there was a better option to spend the $8 million at most that they would have spent on Franco this year, I'm really, really frustrated with the decision. And I saw an article that was saying that leading up to the non-tender deadline, it had him pegged as a potential non-tender candidate, saying that he might be a victim of economics if he were non-tendered. And I mean, I think it is a very important case of how you frame the discussion, because he was not a victim of economics necessarily. He was a victim of the Royals actively deciding that he wasn't worth the money that he earned. Realistically, he earned the money. They took a 1-year flyer on him, and he definitely outperformed what anybody would have expected. And now the Royals don't necessarily have a guaranteed third baseman for next year. They have the payroll space, and they don't have him. And honestly, I think the Royals and a lot of Royals fans have been celebrating this pro player reputation that stemmed from being one of the first teams to guarantee minor leaguers pay. It helped them a lot in the undrafted free agent market. And this blatantly goes against being pro player. There's no reason that Maikel Franco didn't earn the somewhere between $5 and $8 million he would have earned in arbitration. So that was definitely a very disappointing non-tender to me.
Yeah, I think there's a real chance that that he genuinely, when it said victim of economics, he genuinely could have just, they may just not replace that money. They may take away $8 million and use that money on 6 different players.
Right.
I mean,
which
I don't know where. Which is probably not. I mean, you're not going to. It's baseball. You're not signing guys to $1 million contracts that are going to be really productive for you.
Hey man, Michael A. Taylor, don't sleep.
No hate on Michael.
Resident eighth grader Michael A. Taylor.
No, but there's something to be said for, the Royals do have a new ownership group, and John Sherman probably picked the single worst time to get into baseball ownership. But, obviously the Royals...
I blame Mahomes.
Obviously the Royals aren't necessarily holding back in terms of spending. They've already brought in, Taylor on a relatively cheap deal, but they've signed Mike Minor. And all indications are that they're still going to be pursuing more free agents. They've said they want an impact bat. And, they could pursue Kyle Schwarber, who was another non-tender that just hit the free agent market. There's other things they could do.
Michael Franco's a free agent if they want him.
There's other things they could do with that money. But until they're going out and spending more than what people expect out of the Royals, which they currently haven't done yet, the Maikel Franco non-tender, was definitely one that I was frustrated to see.
I think staying in division and other, I'm not sure I have it in me to pretend to be a Twins fan tonight, but I think staying within the division, the Rosario non-tender is interesting.
Yeah.
I think he would have commanded around, I think it was rumored to be like $8 to $9 million, which is obviously bigger than a lot of these other guys. But that being said, I just think that, their justification was that, at least from like athletic writers and stuff, their justification is that it was $9 million, and I guess they have this really pretty highly regarded corner outfield prospect, something or other, coming up.
Oh yeah,
I don't even know
Alex
his name.
Kirilloff.
Yeah, him. Yep. So he's coming up, and apparently their justification was he is major league ready, and that they're not going to spend the nearly $10 million on Rosario, and he's going to come up, and the kid's going to be the replacement. I don't like that justification.
No.
I don't like, $9 million is not a $30 million deal. That's something that no matter what market you are, you can afford a 1-year, $9 million deal. And I think, especially on a team that's in win now mode, I don't really understand saying, hey, we're going to go to a rookie for a team that has back-to-back playoff appearances. That doesn't really make sense to me.
Yeah.
I think you sign him, so you tender him, take him to arbitration, you pay him whatever, you slowly acclimate the rookie, and then once his 6 years of service are up, then you don't re-sign him back and he'll hit the open market. I don't really understand the justification of not tendering him and just saying, yeah, we're just going to go with this rookie. I don't, for a team that's going to try and flirt with 90 to 100 wins this year, I don't really understand it.
Yeah, and Kirilloff actually just became one of very few players ever to make his major league debut in the playoffs. Not that really justifies, him being in the lineup or anything. And I think you make a very good point, Scott. And the Rosario non-tender, I think, it's also interesting to compare that to Kyle Schwarber's non-tender, because I think in a lot of respects they are actually very similar cases, except in the sake of the Cubs, I don't see an obvious left fielder to replace Schwarber.
Sure.
Especially because they non-tendered 2 other outfielders along with him. Like major league or, 4A outfielders, let's say.
Right.
Yeah, I don't love Rosario that much as a player, but Schwarber I don't know. The Schwarber one is more surprising to me. Like you said, it is weird that they're just instantly trusting a rookie. It's just, in Minnesota, it's just kind of an odd thing for a team that, they haven't won a playoff game in years, but seem to be a team that teams will look at, that we've been looking at the last couple of years. They could be really good. But, yeah, the Schwarber, it's just a weird, I don't, My problem with these non-tenders is I don't understand how these guys can't get traded.
Yeah,
I mean, these are
I'd
good
agree.
players. They're solid players. They're not like, you know, they're not horrible contracts like Albert Pujols or something. Like they're good. They're not insane contracts. They're solid players. I just don't understand how you can't get a prospect or anything back for them. It seems just a waste.
Yeah, like it's hard. I think everyone was collectively surprised at Brad Hand clearing waivers. Nobody wanting to pay $10 million to have Brad Hand on their roster for 2021. And
Yeah.
I guess the same must be true for Rosario and Schwarber. There just wasn't enough trade interest before the non-tender deadline for the teams to really feel like they'd get anything afterward. And yeah, I mean, in the case of the Cubs, it's especially a little bit confounding because in the most recent top 30 Cubs prospects that MLB Pipeline did, the Cubs have 3 outfielders in their top 30 prospects. And the 2 that are actually like top 10 would do have a chance at being good major leaguers are Brennan Davis and Cole Roederer, and neither of them has played above high A, double A. Brennan Davis' last game in 2019 was at A ball, and Cole Roederer probably same story. So, in the case of the Cubs, you almost have to envision there's going to be some sort of free agent signing. Maybe they try to get Schwarber on a cheaper contract, but it's in terms of just purely constructing a roster. I mentioned they are maybe trying to shake up the batting order a little bit, get some new bats in there, and just try and get the lineup to look a little different because it hasn't come together in a successful way in a couple of years now. But Schwarber still fits very well into the roster. I mean, there's no two ways about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think, and he's a guy that has been in the National League his whole career, and now you're opening him up to the market of the American League.
Yeah.
Yeah. He could be a really good fit in the AL.
And
where did how much was he supposed to be owed this year?
Schwarber around $8 million.
I mean, are they really gonna get someone that much better than him for $8 million? Like, I don't. It seems a weird risk because now, I mean, I think he could. I mean, again, this is a weird market, so there's a good chance he doesn't. But I would pay $8 million for him, and he put a 2.5 WAR his last year, his last full year. The year before that, 3.2. I mean, he's a solid big league player. He's a power bat, especially if you can get into a hitter-friendly ballpark like Yankee Stadium or Baltimore, where his lefty swing could really work. Like it's just a weird thing to just kind of give up on him when, like you said, they don't have a in-house replacement that he was like blocking or anything.
Well, and the thing is too, like as soon as the Cubs said that they were expecting significant roster turnover, Schwarber's kind of the first guy that I thought is like, okay, you probably want to do something with him. I didn't want him to just be non-tendered. I really think the Cubs could have got at least something for him. But it's hard to say. And unfortunately, I think, building a little bit on what Scott was saying, I am afraid that the non-tenders of guys like Rosario and like Schwarber, the general kind of thinking pattern in baseball is that players don't typically earn as much in arbitration as they otherwise would as unrestricted free agents. In general, especially the first year of arbitration, salaries are still limited quite a bit, and I just worry that this is an indication that players are only headed towards getting underpaid more or underappreciated by the teams they come up with more. I think part of the arbitration system is supposed to be designed so that teams will keep a guy through those first 6 years or they'll trade him. But it suppresses these players' wages, especially during the first 3 years, to the point where almost every player in baseball, when you get through that 6 years, he's been more than worth what you paid him. And it's not necessarily much better that teams like the Rays will just trade these guys off once they start getting into actual arbitration years and they have to pay them their value. But this is, I think more so than before, we've seen significantly valuable players be straight up non-tendered.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to completely put us off topic, but the CBA runs out, I think it's after this year or next year?
This year, this upcoming.
I mean, the next offseason is going to be
a disaster.
Monumental for the future of the sport, because there's a real, I mean, there are a ton of qualms with wage suppressing of these players that it's going to, and especially with as of lately, and especially with this offseason, the amount of examples they'll be able to point to, that this is, I mean, I would be shocked if we start the 2021 season on time.
Yeah.
Because
I don't think we will. Not the only. There's a ton. The biggest thing that's going to be negotiated is what we're talking about. The biggest thing will be, how do we keep a sport with no salary cap competitive without hosing over without screwing over the players.
Yeah.
Basically. How do we make sure that we take care of the players as well as keep a league balanced where the 5 biggest markets aren't winning the World Series every year? That's the biggest topic of conversation. That we don't want a salary cap. That's fine. Baseball's solution for years to not having a salary cap has been this 6 years of control thing before you become a free agent. But now with the way people are waiting the 11th day in May to call somebody up to get a whole extra year of team control, I don't see, at a very minimum, I don't see that specific rule staying through the CBA. That at a very minimum, if everything else stays, that will go. We're about to see the last year of that being a thing, I think.
Yeah, I fully believe that, and I also could see there will never be a salary cap, and I don't think there should be. But I could see a minimal salary cap like there is in hockey.
Salary floor. Yep.
Yeah, salary floor, where they just make sure that a team can't spend I think that the Pirates spent $30 million last year or something like that. You got to make sure that teams are trying to field something competitive, which is also why you've seen, because there's the fear of also tanking, which also ends up hurting players when teams tank because because it lowers the amount of teams that they could even sign with.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just a salary floor that you could then end up with, who's on the later stages of his career, a team being basically forced to give him $10 million, even if he's not worth it, just to meet this floor, which, although some may not like, I think that could be something that makes it would make the game more competitive as a whole, because it would just force teams to field something, just some sort of competitiveness.
Yeah. I find it so hard to try and guess what's going to come out of a new CBA. Man. There's just so much tied up in, and it feels like so many of the things that are happening right now. The pandemic obviously made things a lot more complicated, but it feels like we're seeing so many symptoms of a system that is very, very broken right now, and just trying to pretend that it's okay until we can renegotiate it.
Yeah, 100%.
And
that's absolutely what's going on.
It's going to fall apart hard.
Yes.
All right. So we will now permit the resumption of David Dahl discussion. So the question is, which new free agent would you most like to see your team sign? And
David Dahl.
Christian made it a little bit more specific, a little bit perhaps better of a question. He asked earlier, what would you give Dahl? What kind of contract in terms of length and average annual value?
Anything he wants.
$40 million a year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he'd be that expensive. Like he clearly has an injury, a decorated injury history, and was horrible in 2020. Like in like 40 games, he was a negative one WAR player in like 40 games. So like he was horrible.
Yeah.
And I really don't think it'd be that much. I think you could get him for and because I don't think it would be that much, like AAV wise, I think you get as many years as he's willing to sign for. Hey man, I'll a 4-year deal. I'd give him $5 to $10 million a year for 4 years.
And honestly, I think it makes sense that he's going to want to seek out that contract security, a little bit longer of a deal,
with his injury.
Yeah, I think there will be a little bit of. I'm hoping a lot of teams will be interested in him. He's a good baseball player, and I think it would definitely be smart of him to seek out a little bit of security, like you said, with his injury history, and get on a longer deal. And I think whichever team is willing to offer, that third, fourth year, he's a guy that unlike others when they hit free agency, being 26 years old, he probably wants to get a little bit of a sense of being able to establish himself with a team a little bit more over the course of a couple of years, and rather than taking a 1-year flyer, a kind of a prove it deal that a lot of players have seen, that'll likely end up, it's very possible that that'll end up with him hitting the free agent market again without much promise. Just, because we don't know how players will adapt once again to whatever kind of season we see in 2021. Apparently the Rockies still see his shoulder concerns that kept him out for a little bit of this season as enough of a problem to not want to bring him back. So, yeah, I think he'll be looking for at least a little bit of security, try to stay in one place for a couple of years at a minimum, and that's what it would take. It definitely wouldn't go higher than $10 million a year. I don't think he would exceed $6 million a year, really. But
I'd give him 7 easily. Sure. I'd give him $7 million over 4 years. Sure. Easily, I'd give him 28 over 4 easily, and I'd do it for fun. I wouldn't even think about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's fun to think about David Dahl on
now,
your team.
You're right. My team is in an interesting situation, right? Like I'm not saying a Yankees should do that. That's probably not a good use of their money given their holes and their current lineup and all that. That doesn't really seem like it would make sense. But saying somewhat sad saying this, but David Dahl would instantly be one of our best players.
Yeah.
Instantly.
Yeah.
The day he walked into the clubhouse, he would instantly be one of our best players. And if you can get a guy that is instantly one of the best bats in your lineup for less than $10 million a year, like, what are we talking about? Like, yeah. Easy.
Yeah,
I don't care if you're overpaying $3 or $4 million a year to get him. There is no reason not to. As you can tell, I'm passionate about David Dahl. I want him so badly. It just makes too much sense, I think.
Yeah, for the Yankees, I don't think he's just like you said. The Yankees don't exactly have. If there's one hole that you can point to, it's shortstop defensively, and I guess in the catching position. But they don't really have like this position. Outfield is just not really a hole for them. Clint Frazier was very, very good last year. He's definitely earned that spot.
Yeah.
There's just way smarter uses of $7 to $10 million than David Dahl for you. Yeah.
I mean, the only big guy I could see, or big guy that was not 10 yesterday. I mean, it would be there would have to be an overhaul of the lineup to fit him in. But I think the Yankees have had a lot of interest in Schwarber for a long time, just because they love. I mean, he's a lefty and short porch, and that would just be beautiful to see. But they would have to to like right now. If you put him on the Yankees team, he's a bench player. So like they'd have to maneuver a lot to fit him into a lineup. I mean, Archie Bradley got non-tendered. I mean, he's not a sexy name at all, but I think that the Yankees have had an interest in him for a long time. I could see them taking a flyer on him. They non-tendered Jonathan Holder, which kind of surprised me because he's not great, but for their biggest hole, I think, is pitching depth, and he's a solid arm. So I was kind of surprised at that, but there's no real player right now. I think that was non-tendered that I'm like, David Dalling.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, he's got to be out there. I am interested to see what Adam Duvall, what his market looks like and what he ends up doing. Because I think he fit pretty specifically into that Braves lineup, It seemed like they kind of had a need for his type of player, which was, a solid home run bat and a good platoon candidate at the worst. A very good platoon candidate at the worst. And, they have good defensive players, and he was just an established offensive player and apparently wasn't worth bringing back. So, a lot of these non-tender moves, it's also difficult to fully evaluate until we've seen the free agency to follow.
For sure.
The idea is that the Cubs are going to have to sign somebody to fill that outfield spot. The idea is that the Royals hypothetically will dedicate the money they would have otherwise paid Franco to another free agent. The idea is that the Braves are going to make a free agent signing, maybe Michael Brantley, something like that. But, especially if for teams that are targeting that one guy, if you miss out on him, these moves become very, very questionable.
Oh, sure.
So that brings me to another question, which is which of the, I guess you could say, higher profile non-tenders, notable ones, guys like Schwarber, Duvall that we've been talking about, which of them are most likely to sign back with the team that just non-tendered him?
Just based on how you said it, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Schwarber came back to the Cubs. I mean, unless they really do have their eyes on someone right now, there's just his non-tender just fully created a hole in their lineup. It just doesn't. From a baseball perspective, they need another outfielder now. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he went back there. But like Scott said, his market is wide open now because he can DH anywhere now. So that would be that's the one that I guess I would think I could see them coming back. I mean, I don't think there's any way David Dahl goes back to Colorado.
Yeah, I think that that ship has probably sailed. Yeah, I think there's a chance that Schwarber were to return. I don't think that's that out of the question. Like you said, that's like a pretty massive hole that's just there now. Outside of that, I don't know. Like, I don't see Rosario going back.
No, I mean they've made it pretty clear apparently that they're not terribly interested in having him around.
Right. I think that maybe not one that would go back to the team that he's currently on, but I think Brian Goodwin, there's a chance he goes back to the Angels.
Sure.
It would be as a fourth outfielder. Their outfield is pretty set, and they have Marsh coming up. If he gets an opportunity to start anywhere else, then that's where he'll go. But if the market is kind of saturated on corner outfielders, I think there's a chance that he signs a cheap, like $1 or $2 million deal and goes back to Anaheim. He's beloved there. And
Yeah.
I think as a fourth outfielder or platoon guy, maybe even that's not a bad idea, especially with how Adele maybe didn't blow people away like people thought he would right away. I think maybe having Goody back there to kind of take some of the pressure off Adele might not be a bad idea.
Yeah. Another guy that I had meant to touch on and have forgotten about until now. I have a list of all of the players that were arbitration eligible and whether they got tendered or not, and so it's it's hard to off the top of my head remember every single one. But another guy that I think will be a little bit interesting at least is John Barberia, who was non-tendered by the Cardinals.
For
He missed last year. He missed 2020 with having had Tommy John surgery, but he was a very effective reliever before that. I'd be interested to see what happens to him now. And I think the reliever market hasn't really been set yet. Have we seen a reliever sign? We've seen a couple of starting pitchers sign for sure, but I don't know if we've seen necessarily a reliever, especially a higher profile reliever, sign to really understand quite what the market for them is like.
Yeah, we haven't, and I think Bradley getting non-tendered will be a kind of a big deal in that market as well. Archie Bradley was also non-tendered, so I think the market will be set relatively quick with those two guys at the top of at least the non-tendered helm there.
Yeah, no, for sure. Peyton says, "What about MVP vote getter Ryan Tepera?"
MVP vote getter.
So I'm not opposed to the Cubs bringing Tepera back, except it would they already wouldn't have had to pay him that much. So I don't see him really getting brought back. Which Tepera will be an interesting case too, because I saw a tweet recently. I can see if I can pull it up really quickly, but I saw a tweet the other day. I've committed myself at this point to finding this tweet so that I can actually read it, because otherwise okay. So the top pitches by whiff percentage, fourth was Devin Williams' changeup screwball thing, which we've mentioned before was an incredible pitch. Third was Shane Bieber's slider. Second is Blake Snell's curveball, and the highest whiff percentage on any single pitch in baseball is Ryan Tepera's cutter.
That's why he's an MVP candidate, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah,
that's why he's.
You don't just get MVP votes. You don't just get them by accident.
There's no misclick.
You gotta consider the single pitch whiff percentage. So Tepera, immediately that makes you a very, very good guy on stuff alone.
Well, he's better than Mariano Rivera, yeah.
Yeah, but better cutter, obviously. That's the matter.
For sure.
So, he didn't have the supplementary stuff, maybe. He didn't have the control. But it'll be interesting to see what happens to him. And, I mean, he was... I couldn't tell you what year of arbitration he was in. 5 years of service time. So this is his last year of arbitration, and he's 33 years old. So, it's not like he's going to be the highest profile reliever out there, but it'll certainly be an interesting case. He'll be he'll be more notable for the rest of his career because he got an accidental MVP vote.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Fully deserved.
So yeah, I mean that's most of what we can talk about with the non-tender deadline and the moves that happened around it. I guess one final question that I might pose is, how do you think that, if at all, the new free agents on the market now, especially with respect to the outfielders, the outfielders already on the free agent market, guys like George Springer, Michael Brantley, and Marcell Ozuna were kind of headlining the outfielder market. How do we think the presence of these guys that we've been talking about all the show, how do we think that might change the market, if at all, for the upper end free agents, outfielders especially?
I mean, I don't think they're obviously not market setters. They're not like like you said. I mean, like they're not the big fish, but Rosario, Schwarber, Dahl, they create really good backup plans if you miss out on a guy like Springer or Michael Brantley or Marcelo Zuna. Like there's all it's they're not as good, obviously, which is why they were not tendered. But whenever the market has more depth, it makes teams less desperate to try to get the top guys. Because if you need an outfielder and you know that you could get Kyle Schwarber for $7 million instead of going into a bidding war for Marcelo Zuna, it's obviously a much worse player, but you may be more inclined to do that.
Well, and with Schwarber specifically, he's not quite the StatCast. I guess you could say StatCast baby. StatCast has always loved Marcelo Zuna, and finally this year he showed why. But Schwarber still hits the ball so hard, and even with WRC plus of 90 and without that real offensive breakout season, he could very well come out of next season looking a little bit similar to Ozuna. If he signs a 1-year deal, he could very well go somewhere and finally have a little bit more success that correlates with just how hard he hits the ball. And we'll be looking back wondering how the Cubs ever could have let him go.
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, I don't see him as a fit with the Yankees, but I think that he could have a almost like LeMahieu-like kind of where he could be a better player at Yankee Stadium than he'd be anywhere else because he hits the ball so hard, and obviously the Little League baseball park, and because it's about 175 feet down the right field line, so he'd be able to. So a guy with his swing, I mean, that's why the Yankees have been interested in him for so long. That it's like that kind of match made in heaven thing where that's the kind of place where all those tools that he has could just come together. But I mean, Baltimore's the same way in that right field. So there's a few places I think that he
would do really well in the AL East just in general. I mean, especially American League,
Fenway
designated hitter-friendly ballparks. That's a match made in heaven. Any of those teams.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I mean, that would be fun to watch him in a hitter-friendly ballpark.
Yeah.
I don't know if I see him fitting necessarily on the Blue Jays. They just have a lot of hitters that are not necessarily tied down to one position. If they brought in Schwarber, obviously it's offensive talent, but he's in a very similar position to Vlad Jr., where he doesn't necessarily fit in any position. So then they've got 2 DH candidates. I can't really see the Red Sox bringing him in while they still have JD Martinez, but I'd love to see Schwarber on the Orioles. I think that'd be a great move. I think the Orioles
could be a really good fit.
Yeah. I don't mind that at all, and I think to go back to your original question, I think I don't think the market softens for dudes that are kind of in another level, like those top end free agents.
Yeah.
Those guys' markets are kind of set, but it definitely, especially when you can see the dollar amount that they were non-tendered for. I don't know. I think it definitely. It definitely could throw a wrench in negotiations, and those middle tier of free agents. That's where you're going to see a majority of the change.
Yeah, and now that I'm thinking about it, I just want to add one other thing about Kyle Schwarber potentially going to the Orioles, which is that Brandon Hyde is currently the Orioles manager, and before that, he was the Cubs bench coach.
There you go.
There's no ties there. Yeah, I don't know. Potentially something interesting to watch. If I had to bet on an interesting, dark horse candidate to sign Kyle Schwarber, because I know everyone's on the edge of their seat waiting to see where Kyle Schwarber will play in 2021. But yeah, could be the Orioles. But no, I think you do make a good point, Scott, which is that it maybe makes some cheaper players available, but they're not the same caliber as George Springer, as Marcell Ozuna, at least not right now. And so if you're a team that really wants that guaranteed production, you're still going to shell out for the top guys. Very likely. But unless we've got any other thoughts, that it looks like we lost Adam. We lost him. That is good timing. That'll do it for our hour tonight. No chance he's just he's gone. He's not in the Skype call anymore. So that'll do it for us. We thank you for joining us. As always, we appreciate your questions, your interaction in chat. We will throw up the Fanatics banner once again. If you are shopping Fanatics, please use our link. Benefits us. We appreciate it. And that'll do it for us tonight. We look forward to seeing you next time. Yeah, kind to yourself, be kind to others. And thank you very much. See you next time. All right.